and applying land health knowledge systems and tools. And so the two main objectives that my research group and team is really focusing on is how do we develop and integrate multi-scale rangeland monitoring data, models, and tools to support land management decision-making by developing and improving these tools, but also using these data models and interpretive tools to identify threats and opportunities for land managers by improving our understanding of ecosystem dynamics across spatiotemporal scales. And a lot of what my work at the Jornada for the past 9 or so years has been focused on, and Jeff's work and Nick and the whole team that I have the pleasure of working with has kind of been focused on supporting this decision-making workflow where we design an experiment or monitoring program, we go out and collect data, we analyze it, and then the management team or cohort works on making a decision. And a lot of the tools that we've been building for them, been working on filling gaps in this workflow. And a lot of that is documented through the monitoring manual and other resources that we have on the landscape toolbox. But I wanted to take a moment to ground this presentation in a lot of the tools that we're starting off this next project plan with in place, and take it as an opportunity to recognize the hard work of the team that I've been working on with, and also to recognize that all of this work has been very stakeholder driven and very collaborative between the Jornada and our partners at BLM, NRCS, other research communities through LTAR, USGS, and that none of these tools were really invented in a vacuum, and they really came out of a need expressed largely by our natural resource partners. So next on the design side, we have a number of tools in addition to what's in the monitoring manual. Nelson has developed an R package called sample.design that we use to support BLM's monitoring sample designs. And we've done over 100 sample designs that provide spatially balanced sampling, basically sample designs that then BLM goes out and collects monitoring data based on those sample designs. If for some reason you or one of your partners wanted to develop a similar design, we also have a Shiny app called the Balanced Design Tool that's up on the Landscape Data Commons, or sorry, the Landscape Toolbox, that enables you to just upload a shapefile with the strata of interest and you can draw your own design. So this has turned out to be a really powerful way to introduce random sampling in addition to the targeted sampling that's really common in BLM and NRCS and other monitoring programs. The next piece of the puzzle is the data collection piece. And I think one thing that's interesting is I was trying to neatly bin all of our tools into, are they design, collect, analyze, or decide? And it was really hard for a lot of them because they support multiple parts of this workflow. And our data collection tools are a good example of this, where we aren't just helping people collect data and leaving it there, but we're helping them actually use their data for the questions that they have in hand. So Land PKS, the mobile app project that Jeff Herrick's been leading, is a great example of that, of allowing ranchers, agency staff, partners abroad to collect core methods compatible data. That app in the future will be splitting out because there's so much in that one project. And in the future, I'll be working with Jeff to explore what a mobile data collection app would look like and develop that in partnership with BLM. We're going to split out the soil ID component of Land PKS into a separate app that we'll be building, like most likely in-house here at the Jornada. And then what's really emerged in our discussion talking with BLM is the need for more support in the data to decision-making workflow and taking the business processes that BLM has in terms of making a management decision and helping them work through those processes in a way that integrates new data, integrates new science in a more streamlined way. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. But I do want to acknowledge that in terms of data collection, DEMA has really been a foundation and a force for not only adoption of the core methods and having an easy way for people to collect monitoring data in a consistent way. For years, I've been calling it our digital monitoring manual because it really forces people to collect data correctly. But it also makes those data really easily accessible through the reports. And there's even some assessment tools that are embedded in DEMA. So many thanks to Erica and her team for all of the work that they've put in for DEMA over the years. And I think in moving forward, the challenge will be how do we continue to replicate the success of DEMA, but in other platforms and tools. All right, so the next phase of the workflow is our analysis tools, and those are growing. Pterodactyl is the R package that I've written that enables standardized indicator calculations based on standardized methods, and I'll go into that a little bit more later. Nelson's also developed an analysis package that enables weighted analysis. So it allows us to make landscape inference from monitoring data. So we not only can say 3 out of our 10 plots meet these objectives, but this proportion of the landscape is meeting our objectives, which is generally how BLM and NRCS are looking to frame answers to their questions. And one of the things that we've encountered in analysis is that not every BLM staff member, NRCS staff member is able to easily access an R-based analysis package. And so Nelson and I have been playing around in collaboration with Iowa State on a new statistical approach that would basically be a very simple model-driven analysis estimator to allow us to, that uses Thiessen polygons to understand differences in density across the landscape that will allow us to make landscape scale estimations of the proportion of landscape in different conditions. And so far, the results are promising. And if this whole project works out, then we'll be building another tool that would allow you to just grab all of your monitoring data and upload it. And then we could spit back an estimated analysis of the proportion of your landscape in different conditions, given the data provided. So basically it's not to make folks like Darren redundant, but it's making the use of multiple monitoring data sets more accessible to BLM managers. And I think NRCS would probably be interested in this approach as well. The SEED program has expressed some interest. And then the next tool that I want to briefly highlight is Edit, which Brandon and Jeb have been working closely with the NRCS, Joel Curtis and Sean on, that I really our work with BLM and NRCS has emerged as both a design tool to helping us understand where on the landscape is monitoring needed, where might decisions be best explored, as well as an analysis and decision support tool. And one of the challenges that BLM and NRCS are facing in using ecological sites and Edit is that we have quantitative monitoring data. The Jornada has done an amazing job of leading efforts for quantitative monitoring decision support tools and evaluating that monitoring data and saying 10% bare ground, is that a desired condition? Ecological sites can get us there to a certain extent because they provide the conceptual framework for how an ecosystem might work. But BLM especially is really hungry for quantitative thresholds, or what we call benchmarks. And so Nelson's been working on a benchmark exploration tool that allows you to pull in your monitoring data and maybe explore the distribution and then set your benchmark value based on not just the distribution, but maybe other process-based knowledge. And then apply that benchmark and say, this proportion of our plots or our landscape is meeting our desired benchmark conditions and this other proportion is not. So this was a tool that BLM was really eager to see, but again, NRCS and the SEEP program are excited about these explorations as well. But one of the challenges in this whole workflow that we have is how do we do this at scale? We've been extraordinarily successful at getting people to collect data, but how do we answer not just the site-based and local scale questions that our management partners have, but also the regional and national landscape scale questions that are going to require multiple data sets being brought into the same space and integration with new data sets and models and new analysis approaches. And when we really stopped to think about it, we know of over 70,000 monitoring locations across the US where we have standardized monitoring data, and to not take advantage of it, both in a decision support context, but also in a science exploration context is really a missed opportunity. And so that's really what has led us to the Landscape Data Commons, which has been our big push to build knowledge infrastructure to advance science and management. So in the next part of this talk, I'm going to step through a little bit of what we've been working on with the Data Commons and where we'd like to go with that. So up in this top left, we start with standardized monitoring data, where we bring in all of the core methods data that's been collected through the design and collection tools, not just that the Jornada has directly developed, but that the Jornada has inspired in other programs. So our major partner programs are the BLM AIM program and also the NRCS NRI program. But we've been focusing on also including the National Wind Erosion Research Network. Where Darren and I are working on trying to get all the Jornada core methods data in. I had conversations this week with the Park Service and Nevada Department of Wildlife about could they contribute data to the Data Commons. So we bring that data in, it gets processed through Pterodactyl and harmonized and is stored in the Landscape Data Commons. From there, we can connect those data to erosion prediction models and other types of models. We can make the data accessible via a web portal. We can connect it to all of our analysis tools that are both in development and on the horizon. And I think most importantly, we can connect it to conceptual models of how ecosystems work and make that available to our stakeholders. And to date, there are a number of ways that our stakeholders might engage with all of these tools and data, and we're hoping that through the Data Commons, we can streamline some of that a little bit so that it doesn't matter what your entry point is. If you went in through edit or global edit, you would still be able to access some of and models. Similarly, if you went in through the Data Commons, you would be provided an opportunity to engage with edit and other tools. So there's kind of like four main components to the Data Commons. I know it can seem really complex, but today I really want to walk us through the data harmonization, data access, model connection, and integration components of the Data Commons. And really want to call out Chris Fraser and Chris Bonifant for all of the work that they've done to make the back end in front of the end of this happen, as well as the whole NWERN team and Brandon Edwards for helping us connect to the modeling side of this. We do use kind of a suite of programming languages, kind of just taking the best tool for the job approach. A lot of our analysis stuff, as you've seen, is in R, and most of our backend is in either Python or JavaScript. So the first step to bringing all of this monitoring data together is the data harmonization. And a lot of folks have used DEMA over the years, but a lot of folks have used other data collection systems. Some data is still in Excel, some data is still on paper. We don't have a way to automatically ingest that yet. But in the meantime, we have data from a lot of different formats. And the first thing we need to do is get it into a standard format so that we can calculate standard indicators. And we use pterodactyl to do that. We have a number of core methods that are built into pterodactyl that allow us to calculate indicators in a standard way. So if you're calculating, say, a percent cover based metric from LPI, we know if you use the percent cover function that you'll always get the right answer, or what we hope is the right answer, for and represent percent cover as LPI collects it correctly. So this is a big way of bringing data quality into indicator calculations, because we were finding that people were, say, calculating bare soil differently and not even knowing that that was happening. So this has been a big way that we've been able to standardize analysis processes. The other great thing about having standardized indicator calculation workflows is that we've been able to build data models that make it really easy to use data consistently in other applications. So a big one that we've been working on at the Jornada is getting the standardized monitoring data ready to run through Barrow so we can get wind and transport estimates. And so we know that we always need height, we always need bare soil, and we always need canopy gap for that. And so there's a function in pterodactyl that will gather all of that into the format that we need for Arrow, spit it out, and we send it off to SciNet, and Brandon's able to run it there. So we've done this for a number of different models now, and also some decision support tools that BLM and NRCS use. And again, this is just bringing efficiency into the process, and as well as ensuring data quality in how people handle the monitoring data, because not everybody has the depth of skill set or knowledge of the methods that we do at the Jornada. So I know you guys have probably heard me banging on about pterodactyl for a couple of years now, but it's been really exciting to see the impacts of pterodactyl over the years, and kind of in three main areas. The first is standardized indicators are now a community resource. These data are available to BLM and NRCS staff at all levels through internal web portals and internal data sharing processes. We know that indicators calculated by pterodactyl have been shared with more than 60 BLM and NRCS research partners, and these data are soon to be available publicly through the Landscape Data Commons. We also know that the data that we've been producing here, or not producing, calculating, is being used to support natural resource managements and assessments, including grazing permit renewals, wildlife habitat assessments, land health assessments, and more. The pterodactyl indicators went into the BLM National Sage Grouse Habitat Assessment, which is going to be a really big deal for BLM, and kind of a culmination of a lot of the work that the Jornada has put into that partnership in terms of collecting standardized monitoring data and using that, producing indicators, analyzing those indicators, and putting them in a national assessment. So that's going to be exciting when that comes out. Through the SEEP program, our indicators are also going into some pasture and rangeland socioeconomic assessments. And I've already touched on this a little bit, but through our data models, we're also providing quite a bit of model support to many of the common rangeland models, including the remote sensing products, soil erosion models like Arrow and REM, some ecosystem services evaluations, pasture growth modeling through SEEP again, and ecological site concept development. So it's kind of a back-end tool, but it's really making data accessible across the rangeland ecology community in some new ways, which has been pretty exciting to see. But making data standardized doesn't necessarily inherently mean they're accessible. And so that has been the next challenge of the Landscape Data Commons, is how can we make sure not just our partners who have email access to me are able to access these standardized indicators, but their stakeholders can also access the data. And so that's what we've been trying to do through the Landscape Data Commons data portal. We're about to release version 2 of that data portal, thanks to Chris Fraser's work, which will allow you to access these harmonized data sets and some of the core indicators and pull them down for your own analysis. So that's going to be a really exciting next step in this project. And then ongoing work and really a big impetus for the data commons was, how do we enable data connections to models and then allow us to not just take point-based data, but extend the meaning of that data in time and space. We've been doing that really closely with the RAP team to improve their fractional cover models, as well as the soil erosion working group through LTAR, primarily the ARROW model that we produce here and the REM model that's run by the Tucson ARS lab. But I think I view these two types of models as just the beginning of what we can do. And there's a lot of opportunities for collaboration within the Jornada to expand model connections from the ground-based monitoring data to other types of modeling that we do with the Jornada. So it'll be exciting to explore that in the next project plan. And then finally, our kind of emerging horizon is this data and tool integration piece of the data commons, where we can not just port data into models, but we can start to integrate with other decision support tools, other kinds of data, and really facilitate new ways of understanding and drawing inference from not just for our management partners, but also for the work that we do here on the Jornada. And Nick showed a little bit of that last week. We've anecdotally just kind of been playing around with some of the results from the DERP data and how that compares with the regional data sets from the same ecological site group. And so what we learned from the experiments at DERP, we might be able to use these data to draw inference to regional management practices using the Landscape Data Commons. We also have another number of other projects that revolve around edit Landscape Data Commons connections, two of which are really driven by BLM and NRCS and a need to understand the quantitative monitoring data in the context of the conceptual state and state transition models. So we have the ecological sites summary tool, which allows us to summarize data. It's all of the monitoring data that was collected for a particular ecological site. And then we also are kind of flipping that on its head and saying, what if we had quantitative data just embedded in an ecological site description? And you could explore, if you went to edit, looked at the ecological dynamics section, if you wanted to explore the monitoring data that also occur in these different sites and how they compare. So we're just in the process of working with Jeremy and Jeb to flesh those ideas out. But I think there's some exciting opportunities for not only providing decision support tools, but helping us refine and improve our ecological site concepts by adding quantitative data in. Jeremy and others have also been working on, can we use the monitoring data and the data commons to build quantitative site and state keys? And Nick talked a little bit about that last week. Allie's been working on some inductive approaches to describing ecological dynamics using all of this monitoring data that we have. And then, working with Nick's group, we have a lot of opportunities for exploring new indicators and erosion processes in the ecological site context. And I think one of my big questions is, ecological sites as we know them today were developed with a specific set of indicators in mind, and what happens when you add new indicators like erosion indicators or even core methods indicators that haven't been accounted for in an ecological site. Remote sensing data. How can we bring those all in together with conceptual models and really build a more relevant understanding of how our ecosystems are working, and then use that to explore our broad scale ecosystem patterns, like what we're doing with the Soil Erosion Working Group in LTAR, looking at how erosion and invasive species interact both directly and indirectly, but also looking at how we have change in rangeland condition. And I recently was part of a report for the Rangeland Production Act that was looking at changes in BLM condition over the past 10 years. And one of the findings was that non-native species are increasing on rangelands, and that's not a huge surprise, but is interesting to see that by 2018, we had reached over 50% of BLM's rangeland acres had non-native invasive species present. And that means it's going to be a real challenge, as we've seen with Nick's work on the erosion and invasives question to, non-native species have many impacts on our rangeland ecosystem services. And what does that mean, and that increase mean, and what are our management options given these documented challenges on rangelands? So looking ahead, we've got a lot going on and some really exciting projects. I want to continue to improve and deploy the tools that we have in collaboration with our stakeholders. And it's always going to be a balance of more tools or more data. But it seems like momentum is building to contribute data to the Landscape Data Commons, which is great. And that'll really facilitate the types of tools we can build and what we can learn across ecosystems. We're also hoping to streamline stakeholder interactions with these tools to support management decision-making, and kind of what Jeff and I have been referring to as a new knowledge system that really works you through the types of decisions that you're going to be making and what you need to know in order to make specific decisions. And then really moving to exploring how can we leverage this wealth of data that we have. This is one of the largest ground-based natural resource data sets, I think, on the planet. And so it's a real opportunity to understand rangeland ecosystems and how we understand climate change impacts and what that means for conservation planning. So with that, I'll stop. Really, really grateful to the team at the Jornada that's enabled so many components of this, as well as our partners at BLM, NRCS, and others.